Hello PaintShop Pro users. This is a quick video, or maybe not so quick video, on the dispersion effect in PaintShop Pro using something like version 16 or higher. The dispersion effect is taking an original image that appear and make it appear to be disintegrating or blowing apart, melting, etc. There do exist many Photoshop or Adobe tutorials, but PaintShop Pro seems to be lacking in demonstrations of this. This is not something that I was pursuing, but one of my viewers did ask if I could solve the problem for her. So that's the impetus for getting this started. This is my final image on my very first attempt at dispersion effect. I know it's not terribly fancy, but you can see that it is getting the job done, at least roughly. The techniques and skills we're going to be using, you have to have an image that you want to work on. You will need to be able to identify where your push brush is, how to use layers, how to use masks, layer opacity changes if you desire, and other options that you may want to invoke, such as drop shadows, 3D distortions like spherical distortions, etc., to make your impact greater. So we're going to have an initial series of steps, such as opening your image. Changing the background is another topic, but do it if you wish. A lot of people seem to like to have a very plain white background or black background, something like that, to do this effect on. And then you're going to duplicate your image a couple of times. I'm going to demonstrate all this. Lock the bottom background area to preserve it and keep the second layer visible. Shut off the above third level visibility, and then you can double click the second layer and rename it Distortion to remind you what the layer is for. So here's my final image with bugs. Here's all the layers that I had to go through in order to achieve this effect. These last couple, are just to get this gun explosion effect over here. So let's go back into the history and show you all the little steps that I took to get there, probably more than are necessary. So I just loaded up a new image so we can start all over. You can see we just have the background image. I'm going to right click, go to duplicate, and then I'm going to do that again, duplicate. I'm going to shut off the visibility of this top layer. I'm going to double click on this layer. It made it active. You see how it's highlighted now. And I'm going to rename this Distortion to remind me what I'm working on. And then I'm also going to go into my layers dialog, and on the background I'm going to lock it so that I can't destroy that. I can always go back and start over. Alright, now I've not only have the second layer visible, but it is highlighted, so I can work on that. So for the distortion effect, we're going to make sure that this second layer is active and find the effects brush called the push brush, and then affect its variables, and then brush outward repeatedly to distort our image. So here's our regular brush off on the left. Just below it, here, let me make this Mondo big, is a drop-down menu of options of brushes, and I'm going to use the push brush. You could also use the smudge, and you can use whichever brush you want to use on it. I might start with this one that's called Spots that I found in my list of brushes. So, you know, your basic brushes tend to look like this. If you're lucky, you have some more. If not, you can go out on the web or through Corel's support area and community and find some more brushes. And so we're going to use that one perhaps. And we don't want it 999. I can't even see where the brush falls in that. I'm going to bring it down to, say, 200. And you can see that it's not in the same axis as our face, so I'm going to rotate this around a bit so that it's more in keeping with what I want. And then what I can do is just kind of drag some of this face. I'm going to turn the steps down to maybe 7 and see what happens. And you can see already it's kind of giving you some of the effect that you want, but it's choppy. If you want less choppiness, turn it down to 1. That's going to be smooth, and you can turn the opacity down if you want it to not be 100% visible. So I'm going to go back to my history, undo a couple of steps there because I don't like just how dense I made some of these things. And I may take that opacity down further. And the further I get away from the center, the less visible. I may want that, so I've turned my opacity down even more. Good, that's a good starting point. We don't have to be perfect, do we? Okay, so we've achieved these steps here, starting near the middle of our subject and brushing outward repeatedly. We could have changed brushes, etc., but I don't think that's really necessary yet. Now we want to create a mask on our 2 layers, and then we're going to start using brushes to conceal or reveal our effects. So go to the layers dialog, and on the one we're working on, we're going to drop down to the little mask icon down below here and say show all, which now places a white mask above. And now if I go to my materials palette and I have a black brush on top in the foreground and white brush for the background, wherever I click with my brush, my regular brush, let me make this smaller. So right now I have a regular brush, normal kind of value. Let me bring it down, and oh, started floating my tool brush here. If I just click on that distorted effect, you can see that it's erasing that effect. So we can pick a different brush now that has more of that scatter effect that we're looking for. So look for something like spots again. Say OK. And my program is fritzing out. Here we go. Again, we have a brush that's 999. That's way too big. So I'm going to bring that way down to start with. And over here, we want this guy's face to start disappearing. I might even bring the opacity down a little. So I'm just going to keep those steps down at 1 because we're going to individually click, we're not going to drag. So we want this to be kind of blowing apart a little bit. Might have some bigger chunks in here. The program really doesn't like how many steps I've used already on this computer. So there you can see I'm taking some away. If I don't like what I've done, I can go back to this layer and you'd see that I'm using my mask. All I have to do is paint over those areas with white, which if I add my black and white correctly, I just use the right click and start placing it back in by right clicking to undo the effect. And I can rotate this brush around and do the same kind of thing. Start blowing them apart. Maybe use a different brush that might have smaller spots to it. Again, bringing the size down. And there we're starting to get our desired effect. I'm going to put more of these smaller dots towards the outside. And that's kind of the basics of getting the blow apart here. And then on layer 3, up here, I need to turn it back on, and you can see it brings back everything. But what we want to do is highlight it to activate it and put another mask on, but this time we're going to do hide all. And now you can see that it's hiding all of this layer but letting all of this one through. And now I'm going to go into my materials palette and swap these so that white's in the foreground, and then I can click on my image towards the periphery, make it smaller, maybe rotate it. And you can go back and forth between the different layers. Just remember how you got your brushes set up in terms of how you're blowing them away. Change your rotations, change your sizes. And just keep working it until you get what you were hoping for. And that's the basics of the effect that you're looking for, I think. I'm not real adept at this yet, but that's the method that's described. So what have we done here? We started with this basic layer. If I turn off these groups, we started with our initial image of our zombie friend. We've added a smear layer here, and then masked it and used black to conceal the parts of the smear and white to reveal parts of it. I could definitely have worked this perhaps a little bit more. And then we added another layer with a conceal all of this layer and brought back some by again applying more to get this dispersion effect. So I hope this kind of answered the question of the viewer, how do we do a dispersion effect? And I'm sure that you'll be better at it because you're more motivated. I'm going to show you the rest of the slides, and then you can pause your video to get these slides. All right, and then just keep working your image until you're satisfied, and then go to the top layer, right click, merge, and then flatten all. If you still want to preserve your bottom so you can see what you've done, just shut off the visibility of that bottom layer, right click and say merge visible, and that'll just give you now a before and after effect. Alright, good luck with it. And please make sure you've been viewing this in the highest definition you have available. You can always speed up the recording if I'm speaking too slowly. Please like and subscribe. Thank you.